Misachika is what you'd call the classic underdog, an awkward, unattractive otaku who spends more time immersed in anime than interacting with people. His existence flies under the radar until the unthinkable happens. The most popular girl in school, Alya, inexplicably falls for him. Alya isn't just any popular girl, though. She's the queen bee, the girl who turns heads wherever she goes, with students practically worshipping the ground she walks on. She's so dazzling that even a single glance from her can make someone's day or crush them entirely. One morning, the most coveted boy in school, a Timothée Chalamet lookalike who believes his $2 haircut is enough to woo any girl, musters the confidence to approach Alya. He's certain his charm will win her over, but Alya instantly shuts him down, rejecting him in front of everyone. The poor guy, desperate to save face, tries to pivot, asking for her number in a last-ditch effort. But Alya isn't having it. She hits him where it hurts, bluntly telling him she's not even remotely interested. His ego crumbles as the rest of the school watches in stunned silence, realizing that if this king of popularity couldn't land a date with her, they surely stand no chance either. Later that day, Alya waltzes into class and finds Misachika, the unassuming otaku, catching up on some sleep at his desk. Irritated, she wakes him up with a kick and scolds him, asking if he stayed up all night watching anime again. Misachika admits to it without shame, explaining that it was for something important. Alya rolls her eyes, thinking he was probably involved in some Twitter drama or stuck in an endless online argument. But when she discovers that he actually stayed up just to binge-watch anime recaps, she calls him insane. Misachika laughs it off, saying that for the sake of anime culture, he'd proudly wear a straitjacket. Their banter doesn't stop there. As Misachika lets out a huge yawn, wide enough to fit an eggplant, Alya mockingly comments in Russian that he looks pathetic. Confused but curious, Misachika asks what she said. With a smirk, Alya dismissively tells him that it doesn't matter. First period is chemistry, a class that coincidentally mirrors the bubbling tension between them. Misachika, naturally, forgets his textbook and ends up sharing Alya's. As the teacher drones on about the lesson, Misachika battles his exhaustion, struggling to stay awake. Annoyed, Alya pokes him with her pen, causing him to jolt and raise his hand. The teacher calls on him to answer a question, and in a panic, Misachika turns to Alya for help. She points at something, so Misachika confidently repeats it. Unfortunately, it's completely wrong. The teacher sighs and asks Alya for the correct answer, which she gives effortlessly, making Misachika feel betrayed. When he accuses her of throwing him under the bus, Alya just grins mischievously, insisting she was only pointing at the question number. But what Alya doesn't know is that Misachika has a secret. He's been able to understand her Russian all along. Ever since his childhood, when he used to play with a Russian girl, he had picked up enough of the language to follow along with Alya's sarcastic quips. All this time, Alya had been calling him cute in Russian, and it completely messes with his head. He's left questioning her every move, trying to figure out if she's teasing him or genuinely interested. However, he chooses to keep his knowledge of Russian a secret, knowing that if Alya found out, she'd probably die of embarrassment, and Misachika isn't ready to deal with that level of drama. Later in the day, Alya catches Misachika using his phone during class, which is strictly forbidden unless there's an emergency. She snatches it out of his hand, curious to see what's so important. When she sees a picture of an anime girl with silver hair, she rolls her eyes and hands the phone back, muttering in Russian that her own hair is silver too. Misachika catches the comment, but when he asks her about it, she simply brushes it off and calls him a game junkie. Misachika, of course, spirals into an unnecessary tangent about how he's not a real junkie because he doesn't even have a Twitch stream yet. Alya can't help but feel that there's no hope for him. During lunch, Misachika and his friends sit together, watching as the student council enters the cafeteria. Alya, who serves as the treasurer, walks in alongside her sister Maria and their spokesperson Yuki. The boys can't stop ogling the Kujo sisters, acknowledging that they're way out of everyone's league. Misachika remains uninterested until Yuki, noticing his lack of reaction, suggests they sit with him and his friends. The boys, despite being intimidated, agree. As the group settles in, Yuki and Misachika share a light-hearted conversation about their shared distaste for cafeteria food. Meanwhile, Alya watches them with a look of disdain, though she remains quiet for most of the meal. Yuki later asks Misachika if he's thought about joining the student council, but Misachika laughs and says he'd rather watch that terrible 2010 Airbender movie that no one likes to talk about. Yuki points out that Misachika was her vice president back in middle school and had been very capable, but Alya, switching to Russian, mutters that Yuki doesn't need to tell her how competent Misachika is. Later, Yuki says her goodbyes and Alya says she's surprised any girl would. One be friends with them. Misachika points out that she's his friend, which surprises Alya, who agrees, and suddenly walks away, leaving Misachika confused. As the day progresses, Masachika's mind drifts back to his childhood memories of the blonde Russian girl who had inspired him to learn the language. He remembers how dedicated he was back then, studying Russian just to be able to communicate with her. Yet, frustratingly, he can't remember her name. The next day, Masachika arrives at school early and surprises everyone by tidying up the classroom. Alya is the first to arrive and is shocked to find Masachika actually awake and functional before class starts. She comments sarcastically that hell must have frozen over. Masachika, noticing some dirt on her socks, asks if she stepped in a puddle, but Alya explains that she had been splashed with mud by a passing truck on her way to school. Trying to brush off her embarrassment, Alya awkwardly asks if Masachika has reconsidered joining the student council. Once again, he flatly refuses, joking that he'd rather swallow nails. Alya changes the subject, but her nerves get the best of her, and she ends up flustered. She begins removing her dirty socks, and Masachika, flustered himself, can't help but stare. Noticing his reaction, Alya playfully suggests he fetch her a spare pair of socks from her locker. Masachika reluctantly agrees, but when she teases him to put the socks on for her, he panics and hesitates. Alya, however, insists, telling him it would be a reward for helping her out. As Masachika nervously complies, he accidentally brushes against a sensitive spot, and Alya reflexively kicks him in the face, sending him tumbling. Despite the pain, Masachika's inner otaku deems it worth the suffering. Later, when he tries to apologize, Alya brushes him off again, calling him a leg fetish scum in Russian. However, she also confesses that she isn't actually mad at him and even apologizes for kicking him. When she checks if he's okay, Masachika awkwardly dodges the question and thanks her for giving him a glimpse of heaven. This only embarrasses Alya further, leading to a playful chase around the school as she tries to escape her own flustered feelings. Eventually, they both cool down, and Masachika offers Alya her favorite drink as a peace offering. Touched that he remembered such a small detail, Alya switches to Russian and shyly asks if he wants a sip. Realizing this could be a chance for an indirect kiss, Masachika freezes up, overwhelmed by the prospect. Instead of seizing the moment, he chickens out and pretends not to understand. As usual, Alya laughs to herself, thinking he's still clueless about her Russian comments, completely unaware that Masachika has been following her every word all along. Several days later, Masachika finds himself in a storage room helping Yuki, the two of them goofing around as usual. Suddenly, Alya appears from behind a pile of boxes, her presence catching them both off guard. She playfully laments about always being the third wheel in these situations, making Masachika blush awkwardly. The girls quickly redirect him to help with their original task, sorting out the storage space. Masachika dutifully starts by bringing down a pile of board games, which gives Yuki the perfect opportunity to gloat about her last victory. Rolling her eyes, Alya chimes in, calling them a cringy couple before telling them to focus and get back to work. Then, in Russian, she mutters under her breath, wishing someone would pay attention to her too. Masachika shivers at the unexpected vulnerability in her voice, secretly understanding every word, but chooses not to react. Alya, oblivious to his comprehension, continues to think she's being sly. After cleaning up the storage room, the group heads to the student council office where the student council president, Kenzaki, introduces himself to Masachika. Kenzaki is impressive with the charisma and confidence of a leader, though Masachika internally compares him to an unfinished art project, wondering how someone so scatterbrained ended up in charge. As Masachika prepares to make a quick exit, Kenzaki insists on treating him to dinner as a gesture of gratitude for his help. Masachika, ever the introvert, tries to decline, but Yuki encourages him to accept, joking that his only plans for the evening involve meeting tumbleweeds at home. Kenzaki, perplexed by her strange metaphor, wonders aloud how Yuki knows what Masachika's home life is like, but she just smirks and says they go way back. Kenzaki extends the dinner invitation to the girls as well, and they both agree to join. At the restaurant, Kenzaki praises the group for finishing the storage room cleanup so efficiently. Yuki, as usual, takes the chance to hype up Masachika, crediting him with their success. Impressed, Kenzaki asks if Masachika would consider joining the student council, but Masachika declines with a laugh, saying he'd rather step on a Lego. Kenzaki, persistent, argues that being on the council would significantly boost Masachika's recommendations for university, but Masachika remains disinterested, more focused on recommending his favorite manga series to anyone who would listen. As the conversation flows, Yuki adds to the pressure, pestering Masachika about why he's being so stubborn. Masachika finally asks why Yuki is so intent on him joining when she's practically guaranteed to win the election. But Kenzaki drops a bombshell, revealing that Alya is planning to run for student council president as well. This revelation shocks Masachika, but Alya confirms her intention to run, her voice filled with determination. After dinner, Kenzaki slyly suggests that Masachika walk Alya home while he takes care of Yuki. The group splits up, and as Masachika walks alongside Alya, he notices that she's unusually quiet and distant. When they reach her stop, Alya simply waves goodbye and leaves without her usual playful banter or a single word in Russian, leaving Masachika confused and concerned. Back at home, Masachika senses something is off the moment he steps inside. Sure enough, Yuki is casually lounging on his couch, flipping through a manga. When he questions her presence, she ignores him, fully absorbed in a chapter featuring a couple from Alabama. Masachika calls her out on pretending to be childhood friends in front of everyone at school, but Yuki retorts that being siblings doesn't contradict the narrative she's created. With that out of the way, they focus on the manga she's reading, discussing its cultured content and exchanging lighthearted banter. The next morning, Masachika wakes up to find Yuki sprawled across him in bed. He groggily pushes her off, quipping that he's not interested in going full Targaryen with her. Later, the two head to the mall, where Yuki browses through clothes while Masachika feels a growing sense of dread as he checks the price tags. As they shop, Masachika mentions noticing a silver-haired figure lurking at the edge of his vision. Yuki, always a step ahead, tells him she noticed the peeping Tom long before. When they finally confront the mystery figure, it turns out to be none other than Alya. Trying to play it cool, Alya claims she just happened to run into them, but neither Masachika nor Yuki buy her excuse. Yuki invites Alya to lunch with them, but Masachika tries to dissuade her, knowing the restaurant serves notoriously spicy food. Alya, undeterred by his warnings, insists on joining them. Moments later, she finds herself staring at a dish that could easily be mistaken for a bowl of molten lava. Despite Masachika's concern, Alya stubbornly digs in, only to immediately regret it as the fiery spices assault her senses. In a mix of pride and desperation, Alya switches to Russian, tearfully begging for help but refusing Masachika's offers whenever he tries to assist her. Meanwhile, Yuki, ever the troublemaker, eggs Alya on, offering to make her meal even spicier. Masachika sees through Yuki's ploy but is powerless to stop the chaos. Alya, determined not to back down, pours the extra spice into her dish, resulting in her screaming out in pain. After they finally escape the restaurant, Masachika offers to buy Alya some ice cream to cool down. As they walk, Masachika, curious about her motivation, asks why she wants to run for student council president. Alya shrugs off the question at first, saying she doesn't need a reason to aim high. However, in a rare moment of vulnerability, she quietly admits that she doesn't have a running mate yet. Masachika asks if she's planning to run alone, and Alya jokes that she might just recruit a random stranger to meet the requirements. But in Russian, she confesses that she wishes Masachika would run alongside her. Her words stir an old memory in Masachika, reminding him of a time when he saw a girl cry after losing an election, leaving him with a pang of sympathy for Alya. As they finish up their day, Alya drags Masachika along to do some more shopping. He protests at first, but then realizes that Alya doesn't have many close friends because of her seemingly perfect but prickly demeanor. Feeling a bit sorry for her, Masachika agrees to accompany her. They browse through various stores, with Alya growing increasingly frustrated, suspecting that Masachika's kindness stems from pity. When she tries on a particularly stylish outfit, she hopes to impress him, but before she can show off, she has a sudden moment of panic, worried that he won't react at all. Finally, Alya steps out of the changing room, and Masachika, to her relief, compliments her outfit with unexpected sincerity. Flustered by his genuine praise, Alya retreats back into the stall, unsure how to handle the sudden surge of emotions. Determined to impress him further, she tries on outfit after outfit, each time seeking his approval. Eventually, she attempts a more daring look, hoping to tease him with a bit of skin, but when she opens the curtain, she's shocked to find Yuki standing there instead of Masachika. Embarrassed, Alya switches to Russian, wishing she could disappear. Masachika, overhearing her, translates the comment for Yuki, who teasingly calls Alya a big baby. On the train ride home, Alya silently stews over everything that happened, from the skimpy outfit she wore to her awkward interactions with Masachika. But as she watches him and Yuki exchange goodbyes, a more pressing thought invades her mind. Why did Masachika and Yuki get off at the same station? After a long day, Alya returns home where her sister, Maria, greets her with a warm smile. However, Maria quickly notices that Alya seems to be in an unusually melancholic mood, something out of character for her typically composed sister. Sensing an opportunity to get to the bottom of things, Maria gently probes her about what's going on. Alya tries to brush it off, but eventually lets it slip that it has something to do with Masachika, her peculiar classmate. Maria's eyes immediately light up with excitement, thrilled at the thought that perhaps, after all these years, a boy might have finally pierced through Alya's impenetrable emotional armor. Alya, however, scoffs at the idea and firmly insists that her relationship with Misachika is strictly platonic. They're just friends, nothing more. Maria arches an eyebrow, unconvinced. She can't help but wonder aloud how Alya, the queen of being selective with people, could even manage to be friends with someone like Misachika, a notorious slacker whom Alya usually would have no patience for. Alya hesitates but eventually begins recounting the story of how they met, taking Maria back 6 years to their time in Russia. It all started when Alya's class was split into groups for a project. The winners were promised an enticing prize, and Alya, being the perfectionist she was determined to excel. She went above and beyond, traveling into town to conduct interviews and compile her research. But when she returned to school, ready to contribute, she found her group completely indifferent to the project's success. Her classmates, future couch potatoes in the making, didn't share her drive and mocked her for working too hard. Alya's efforts were dismissed, and despite her attempts to rally the group, she found herself working solo, essentially writing a dissertation for an assignment that should have been a team effort. The prize went to another group, leaving Alya devastated and questioning why she ever expected others to match her level of ambition. From that moment, Alya resolved to harden her heart, vowing to be self-reliant. Fast forward to years later, she transferred to a prestigious Japanese school and encountered Misachika, who, to her dismay, appeared to be yet another slacker who couldn't be bothered with the simplest tasks. When the school festival approached, everyone was given responsibilities, and unsurprisingly, Alya shouldered her burden alone. Other students tried to convince her to relax. It was just a festival after all, but Alya's resolve was unwavering. She worked herself to the bone until Misachika suddenly intervened, urging her to go home and rest. To her astonishment, he had even arranged for the Handicrafts Club to assist in her absence, demonstrating that even a slacker like him could rally others to help if necessary. Misachika explained his methods to Alya, telling her that there was no point in handling everything alone. This, however, ticked Alya off, as she couldn't understand why he found it so wrong to take the festival seriously. She launched into one of her eye-rolling speeches about not compromising on quality, insisting that there was nothing wrong with working hard, especially since no one else seemed to care as much as she did. Misachika calmly reminded her that the whole point of festival attractions was to work together. Instead of doing everything herself, he suggested she use a bit of emotional blackmail to guilt-trip the others into working hard alongside her. But when he noticed she was gearing up for another lecture, he quickly apologized and expressed his appreciation for all her efforts. Reluctantly, Alya agreed to head home, but she couldn't help but wonder, what exactly was Misachika's deal? The next day, to her surprise, Misachika's plan worked, and the other students put in real effort. The festival ended up being a resounding success, and for the first time in a long while, Alya felt like she was part of something bigger than herself. She even sought out Misachika during the after-party, curious about his seemingly out-of-character behavior. They bantered about her dancing abilities, and for the first time, Alya found herself laughing at his jokes rather than getting frustrated. As the night went on, a group of Misachika's admirers attempted to corner Alya for a dance, but Misachika grabbed her hand and whisked her away, declaring that she was already taken. Alya's heart pounded as she was caught off guard by the gesture, and in that moment, something shifted. She was no longer just tolerating Misachika, she was beginning to genuinely enjoy his company. From then on, Alya's interactions with Misachika grew more frequent, and while she continued to needle him with her sharp tongue, deep down, her feelings were evolving. Returning to the present, Maria listens intently to the story, her eyes practically twinkling with the classic friends to lovers energy she recognizes from her own past experiences. Alya rolls her eyes, insisting that Misachika is nothing more than a friend. Maria, however, isn't convinced and teases Alya, suggesting that her newfound attachment to Misachika isn't as platonic as she claims. Alya tries to deny it but admits that Misachika is reliable when it counts. Maria responds by enthusiastically gushing over their budding relationship, much to Alya's dismay. The next day, Misachika arrives at the student council to cover for Yuki. Maria is excited to meet him and introduces herself as Alya's older sister and the council's secretary. Despite her initial professionalism, she playfully insists that Misachika drop the formalities since he's practically family, thanks to his friendship with Alya. As they exchange pleasantries, Maria suddenly experiences a moment of recognition when she hears his first name. She freezes, realizing something but chooses to keep it to herself, apologizing for her sudden pause before continuing the conversation. Later, as Maria and Misachika shop for office supplies, Maria gets distracted by a cute plushie. She suggests buying one for each council member, but Misachika quickly shoots the idea down, humorously pointing out that giving out plushies will cement Kanzaki's status as a lifelong virgin. They compromise on not buying the plushies for the council but decide to grab one for Maria herself. As they walk back, Misachika observes Maria's quirky nature and wonders how Alya manages to deal with such an energetic sister. Their banter continues, with Maria naming the plush after Alya, claiming it symbolizes their bond. At their next stop, Maria gets busy talking to the tea shop owner while Misachika zones out, lost in thought. His mind drifts back to memories of his parents' divorce and the emotional aftermath of choosing to live with his father while Yuki stayed with their mother. Just as he starts to sink deeper into his thoughts, Maria notices his distant expression and brings him back to the present, giving him a comforting hug and patting his hair. The gesture feels strangely familiar to Misachika, momentarily soothing him, until Maria accidentally burns him with hot tea, effectively ruining the moment. Despite the chaos, Misachika can't help but appreciate the strange but supportive bond he's forming with Alya's family. Later on, Misachika and Maria return to the student council room, arms full of the supplies they'd purchased. As soon as they step inside, Kanzaki jokingly warns Maria not to leave her creepy demon plushie behind. The two of them hand over the items to Kanzaki, who glances through the supplies and thanks Misachika for preventing Maria from turning the council office into something straight out of Five Nights at Freddy's. Shifting to a more serious topic, Kanzaki asks if Misachika has considered officially joining the student council, but Misachika brushes it off, saying he'd rather watch paint dry. Still, he admits he doesn't mind helping out occasionally. Maria chimes in with a suggestion. Misachika could just join on paper, which makes him question why they're so eager to have him on board in the first place. Sensing his resistance, Kanzaki decides to dig a little deeper, asking Misachika why he'd prefer drinking sewer water over joining, hinting that perhaps there's more to his reluctance. He even recalls how Misachika had been a star back when he was vice president in middle school. Misachika, however, dismisses the compliment, saying that those days are long gone and he no longer has ambitions worthy of such a role. Kanzaki, always the instigator, reveals a surprising personal detail. He confesses that he only became the student council president to impress someone way out of his league. Misachika raises an eyebrow in surprise, so Kanzaki pulls out a picture of his former self, a rather hefty version that Misachika barely recognizes. The shocking transformation leaves Misachika gaping, and he blurts out that Kanzaki looks like he devoured his twin. Kanzaki admits that he was a lazy bum back then, but everything changed when he fell for someone far beyond his reach. That's when Misachika realizes Kanzaki managed to woo Chisaki, an impressive feat considering his former appearance. Kanzaki even adds that Maria joined the council only because Chisaki asked her to, with Maria playfully pleading guilty to the charge. With the mood lightened, Kanzaki steers the conversation back to Misachika, reminiscing about how well he and Yuki worked together in middle school. He assures Misachika that he has nothing to be ashamed of, nudging him toward reconsidering the student council. At this, Misachika recalls the good old days with his sister, and Kanzaki, spotting the nostalgia on his face, suggests it wouldn't be so bad if he joined the council again, just for the sake of making someone else president. Misachika agrees to think about it, and Kanzaki and Maria move on to other topics while Misachika ponders his next steps. He soon asks where Alya is, and Kanzaki informs him that she's off settling a dispute between the baseball and soccer teams. Apparently, both teams are fighting over the school field for practice space. The soccer team has regionals coming up, while the baseball team is being scouted by professionals. Ordinarily, Chisaki would handle disputes like this, but with her unofficially away on convenient duties, the task fell to Alya, who seems to be struggling with the situation. Hearing this, Misachika decides to head over and check things out. Sure enough, he arrives to find the baseball and soccer teams locked in a heated standoff, with Alya stuck in the middle trying to mediate. As tensions rise, the soccer team sarcastically asks her what brilliant solution she has to offer. Alya, thinking quickly, suggests they use the Riverside Park for practice. However, the soccer team passes the suggestion to the baseball team, who flatly refuse. Throughout the argument, both team captains remain suspiciously silent, and Alya begins to realize that her authoritative approach isn't working. Years of being distant and dismissive toward others have left her without the influence needed to sway them now. Feeling helpless, she quietly starts to cry, muttering in Russian for assistance. Just then, Misachika steps in, announcing that he's now in charge of general affairs for the student council and there to help. A few moments earlier, he had been nearby, observing the situation from a distance. He knew Alya's direct method was bound to fail but figured it would be a good learning experience for her, until he heard her soft plea for help in Russian. Unable to resist, he swooped in to save the day. The teams immediately recognize him from his middle school days, and Misachika quickly proposes a compromise. The baseball team would practice at the Riverside, given their smaller numbers, but in return, the soccer team would send some of their members to assist with the setup. The boys begin to object, but Misachika shoots a glance at the soccer team's management. The head manager, who had been silent up until now, suddenly steps forward and offers her team's help. The baseball players, sensing an opportunity, immediately agree, hoping for a grand slam in more ways than one. With the dispute finally settled, Misachika instructs the teams to file official practice requests the next day, while Alya stands there in awe, looking like a surprised Pikachu. As they head back to the office, Misachika apologizes for intervening and unintentionally making Alya look bad. Alya, to his surprise, lets it go but presses him on how he knew the soccer manager would step in. Misachika, impressed by her observation, explains that the manager is actually dating the baseball team captain. Of course, Alya hadn't noticed this. She was too busy monologuing to pick up on the subtle cues. The baseball captain had been silent because he was torn between helping his girlfriend and keeping his priorities in check. Misachika knew that the manager would jump at the chance to resolve the conflict for everyone's benefit. Kenzaki catches up with them and asks how it all went. Alya praises Misachika for working his magic, and Kenzaki commends them both. However, Misachika isn't fooled and calls out Kenzaki for setting the entire situation up. Kenzaki, grinning, admits to his scheming and slyly asks if Misachika has made up his mind about joining the council. With a sigh, Misachika finally agrees, resigning himself to stepping on metaphorical Legos just to join. Kenzaki gleefully invites him to the office to get started on the paperwork. Later, as Alya and Misachika head home together, Misachika laments getting played by yet another anime glasses guy. Alya then asks if he's really joining the council just to run alongside Yuki for the presidency. Misachika turns the question around, asking if she would back down from the presidential race if he were to run. Alya's determination flares up as she insists she would never back down, even if it meant going up against him directly. Expecting that response, Misachika makes a surprising offer. He'll help her become student council president. Alya is taken aback, but Misachika assures her that if that's what she wants, he'll support her every step of the way. Stretching out his hand, he offers his partnership. Wiping away her tears, Alya takes his hand, and they officially form a team. However, Alya says something in Russian that sparks a sense of familiarity in Misachika. The nostalgic feeling brings a smile to his face, until he realizes that Alya is cutting off the circulation in his hand. Playfully, Alya asks if he was thinking about someone else, and Misachika realizes he's stepped into dangerous territory. She presses him, accusing him of thinking about Yuki after promising to be there for her. And even though Misachika denies it, Alya swiftly delivers a palm print to his cheek as punishment. Afterward, she extends her hand to help the idiot back on his feet. On the way home, Misachika jokes that his stats have increased thanks to her slap, but Alya fires back with a roast about his barely functioning brain. When they arrive at Alya's building, she asks if he's lost feeling in his cheek yet, but Misachika assures her he's fine. Then, without warning, Alya moves closer and plants a quick kiss on his cheek, leaving him completely shocked. Alya teases him for being surprised, while Misachika tries to decipher whether the kiss was intentional or just an accidental brush of cheeks. Alya walks away without providing any answers, leaving Misachika wishing he understood what she had said earlier in Russian. Unbeknownst to him, Alya had actually confessed her love to Misachika in Russian, and now she's having a mini meltdown over it. Even though she refuses to admit her feelings openly, she wonders if he'd just laugh in her face if he ever found out. Still wrestling with her emotions, Alya hears the front door open and sees Maria sitting nearby, looking troubled. When Alya asks what's bothering her, Maria pulls out the plushie and uses it to distract her, dodging the question entirely. As Maria walks away, she casually mentions meeting Misachika earlier and now understanding why Alya might have fallen for him. Alya vehemently denies the accusation yet again, but Maria advises her to confess her feelings quickly before someone else swoops in and steals him away. Meanwhile, Misachika is cringing as he reflects on the corny romance he witnessed earlier. He starts questioning the authenticity of Alya's love confession, but after a moment of overthinking, he convinces himself that it must be a figment of his imagination. His mind then drifts back to his childhood, remembering the frequent roast battles his parents had. This leads him to conclude that love, much like Sakura in Team 7, seems pretty useless. When Misachika arrives home, he notices Yuki's shoes by the door and suspects she might have set him up to join the student council. Reluctantly, he steps inside and finds Yuki in her fruit guard getup, making a rather extravagant display. Surprisingly, Misachika remains unfazed and accuses her of orchestrating this situation on purpose. Yuki admits to it but explains that she simply wanted to break the cliché of him walking in on her. Misachika is baffled by how clueless Yuki seems, but she attributes it to an overload of plot-induced brain rot. Yuki borrows some of Misachika's brain cells to acknowledge that her grand gesture was an apology for tricking him into joining the council. However, Mika, overhearing this conversation, praises Yuki's bravery in thinking her grand package was enough. Yuki insists she saw Masachika checking her out, but Masachika reveals that guys typically prefer subtle glances rather than full views. Yuki accepts this with grace but insists that Masachika looked her up and down. After some back and forth, Masachika admits he did check out her top half. Later, Yuki is in Masachika's room drying her hair and inquiring whether Kanzaki managed to recruit him to the council. Masachika confirms it and also mentions he'll be running for president with Alya. Yuki is stunned that Alya would pull such a move and laments the cosmic injustice of her smaller chest size compared to Alya's. Yuki insists that her own small but mighty package should be enough and offers Masachika a feel. When he refuses, Yuki brings up an old memory from elementary school where Masachika allegedly took the first squeeze of her chest. Masachika, struggling to recall the incident, finds it hard to believe, but Yuki narrates a game of tag from their childhood that turned into a game of grabs. Despite her detailed recounting, Masachika remains unconvinced, claiming he would have remembered such an event if it had happened. Yuki, finally letting it go, reminds Masachika of her asthma back then, which made her less capable of playing. Now, she's recovered and hands him a brush as a token of apology for the old grievances. As Masachika brushes her hair, he apologizes for choosing Alya over her. Yuki reassures him that a bit of sibling rivalry would add to the drama and invites him to come back to her if the pressure of Alya's burden gets too much. Masachika, in turn, says there's no better way to go. Yuki leaves, glad that Masachika has found a new source of motivation, though she warns him that she'll still crush him like a nut if necessary. The next morning, Masachika is puzzled by Yuki's lack of any heinous wake-up pranks, assuming she must still be upset about the previous day's revelations. Determined to make amends, he gets up only to be startled by a hand grabbing him, which causes him to lose his chocolate cream in fright. Yuki laughs at his panicked expression but soon realizes she's stuck due to her own large posterior. Seizing the moment, Masachika takes revenge by stuffing his face with more cream, leading Yuki to lament getting her face stuffed with unborn nephews and nieces. Later, at school, Alya nervously awaits Masachika's arrival, trying to calm herself by thinking he might just be sleepwalking as usual. To her surprise, Masachika struts in looking bright-eyed and full of energy. As he interacts with classmates, Alya, viewing him through her love-struck filter, imagines him looking like Dazai from Bungo Stray Dogs, which she finds somewhat attractive. She quickly tries to shake off her feelings and focuses on class. During gym class, Alya impresses with an excellent serve, while Masachika gets a ball to the head. Afterward, Masachika is nursing his head injury when Alya arrives to check on him. She offers to take him to the nurse's office, but he reassures her that getting hit in the face by a ball isn't new for him. Alya decides to play nurse, and as she examines him closely, Masachika struggles to maintain composure. When Alya fiddles with her hair, she gives him a close view that nearly distracts him, confirming his theory about peeking. Alya suggests they get some water, and as they head to the tap, Masachika becomes distracted by how much pressure Alya's throat can handle. Determined to wash away his inappropriate thoughts, he focuses on keeping his eyes on something else. Maria spots them and approaches, wondering why Masachika keeps looking up. Turns out he's thanking his luck for the gym uniforms. Maria notices he's wet and uses her towel to dry him off, which gives Masachika a brief but undeniable private view. He thanks her for the rub-down and jokingly comments that he now understands how dogs must feel. Maria flirts with him, saying dogs have the best style, but Alya interrupts, suggesting they head back. As they leave, Masachika prepares for Alya's reprimand, but to his surprise, she's still concerned about his injury and hasn't caught on to his wandering thoughts. Alya, now red-faced with realization that Masachika wasn't paying attention due to hunger rather than boredom, is further flustered. Masachika tries to make light of the situation with jokes, but Alya, irritated by his lack of seriousness and her own overthinking, storms off, regretting her concern for the clueless idiot who she insists she does not have feelings for. After her last class, Masachika asks Alya if she wants to go to the student council office together. She looks at him with a mix of annoyance and disbelief but silently walks away. Masachika wonders if he crossed a line, but then notices a group of well-trained simps exiting the office. Peeking inside, he finds a Masachika lookalike ready to take on the role of head chopper. Panicked, he tries to leave but is pulled back and apologizes for being mistaken for someone involved with the baseball and soccer teams. Apparently, Chisaki had taught the boys a lesson for ignoring Alya, though she assures Masachika she was gentle with her sword. Chisaki then calls Kanzaki her defense, and he reassures Masachika that Chisaki won't get rough with others, except him. Chisaki emphasizes this by giving Kanzaki a playful smack, which he takes in stride. Maria walks in and warns them not to get carried away, leading to Chisaki apologizing to Kanzaki for overdoing it. They exchange affectionate glances, and Alya and Masachika start gossiping about whether Chisaki has a secret torture chamber. Maria, noticing their chattiness, teases them about their cuteness. Yuki arrives, apologizing for her lateness, and Kanzaki starts the meeting by asking Masachika to introduce himself. Masachika takes the floor, states his position, and announces that he and Alya will be running mates in the upcoming election. Masachika then explains that his entire persona is modeled after a Nice Skull subscriber, and takes a seat. Kanzaki commends him and assigns him to work with Maria for the day to get accustomed to things. Yuki interrupts, saying she needs to discuss the budget with the arts club, and since Alya is the treasurer, she'll need to accompany her. Alya agrees, and the girls head out together, but Masachika senses a storm brewing. On their way, Alya asks Yuki if they can talk privately, leading them to an empty classroom. There, Alya reveals her plan to run for office with Masachika, only to learn from Yuki that he's already beaten her to it. While Alya is relieved to clear that up, Yuki starts airing her grievances about losing Masachika. When Alya inquires further, Yuki declares that she loves Masachika more than she loves her own parents. Alya is stunned by this revelation. When Yuki presses Alya on her feelings for Masachika, Alya insists she considers him only as a friend. Yuki pushes her to admit her true feelings, cornering Alya until she finally declares that she won't let Yuki have him because Masachika is hers. Yuki is pleased with this answer and says they should head to the arts club now. They agree to use their code names for the upcoming battle, and Yuki walks ahead while Alya stays behind to process the impact of her own claim on Masachika. Meanwhile, Masachika is working with Maria and is surprised by her efficiency, especially in contrast to Chisaki, who is fidgeting as if she's holding in pee. Kanzaki dismisses her and apologizes for the disturbance, but Masachika suspects her skills are mostly in torture tactics. Maria suggests they take a break and offers tea, mentioning her expertise with it. When Masachika sees the jam on the table, he asks if it's a Russian tradition, and Maria confirms. He then inquires if black tea is only a winter staple, but Maria explains it's a year-round thing because her mother was a tea enthusiast. Masachika admits his knowledge of Russia is limited to movie references, despite studying the language due to a crush. As he sips the tea, he recalls that his estranged mother is also a tea lover but gets distracted when Maria adds more jam. He tries it but finds it an acquired taste. Just then, Yuki and Alya return, and there's an odd tension between them. Alya quickly sits close to Masachika, claiming it's Russian bad luck for a girl to sit at the corner of the table. When Masachika notices Yuki's intense stare, he realizes something must have happened between them. Maria confirms the Russian superstition but clarifies it's more for those seeking marriage. Alya brushes it off and responds in Russian that she hasn't found her groom yet. Masachika is relieved but puzzled by what it means. Maria hands Alya a mountain of jam, making Masachika curious about her capacity. As the day winds down, Kanzaki dismisses the first years. On the way home, Masachika suggests stopping by a family diner to discuss the upcoming elections. Alya laments that it's not a date, which makes Masachika cringe at the thought of Russian customs. At the diner, Alya orders a large amount of dessert to feel better, and Masachika asks if anything happened with Yuki. Alya inquires if he and Yuki are dating, but he vehemently denies it, saying he'd rather face a colossal titan. When Alya wonders what's going on, Masachika explains that Yuki just enjoys messing with people and shifts the conversation to more pressing matters. He reveals that their chances of winning against Yuki are slim. At the start of middle school, there were 6 pairs of candidates, including himself and Yuki, but half dropped out after a student congress debate that skewed the favor toward one side. Alya asks why so many dropped out, and Masachika explains that it was essentially a preview of the elections, which made the outcome seem predetermined. Alya is frustrated by the odds and accidentally breaks her straw as she drowns her sorrows in dessert. She switches to eating more dessert, prompting Masachika to wonder if it's really that good. Alya decides to tease him by offering him a taste of her dessert. Despite his initial reluctance, Masachika accepts and takes a mouthful, which draws attention from the rest of the diner. Masachika notices a familiar figure outside but is interrupted by Alya asking how they can compete with Yuki. He suggests they approach the election from a different angle to appeal to students, using Kanzaki's surprising win as an example. Even though Kanzaki wasn't on the council and faced a formidable rival, his success was unexpected and impressive, leading to widespread support. Alya wonders if she needs a compelling backstory to showcase her hard work, but Masachika is too preoccupied with the dessert incident. Deciding to order a meal and a fresh spoon to avoid further awkwardness, Masachika is teased by Alya for being flustered over something minor. He asks if swapping DNA is a common practice in Russia, and Alya, in Russian, tells him he's the only one she'd do it with, making Masachika nervous. They return to discussing the election, and Masachika says their first chance to gain support will be at the end of the first term when the council delivers its policy speech. Alya asks what she should include in her speech, and Masachika advises her to speak from the heart, acknowledging her charm. Alya blushes and wishes for more praise. When she asks about the food, Masachika offers her some, but he remembers she can't handle spicy food. Alya, stubborn as ever, agrees to try a chili pepper despite its heat. After she swallows it and mourns her taste buds, the pair walks home. Alya asks what Yuki might do now that she's lost her running mate, and Masachika speculates that Yuki, being highly popular, might select someone from their old student council. However, if she teams up with Tanema, her former opponent from middle school whose campaign ended bitterly, it could create problems. Masachika concludes they'll find out soon enough. The next day, Yuki introduces a new council member, and Masachika nearly chokes when Ayan walks in as a new member of the student council, joining general affairs with Masachika. After leaving the room, Masachika hears a faint sound calling him Master. Just as he's about to pull out some holy water from his pocket, he notices Ayano standing behind him. She requests that he follow her, and Masachika decides to comply. They head into a quieter area, where Ayano asks Masachika if the rumors about him running for president with Alya are true. When Masachika confirms this, Ayano reveals that the head of the family, i.e. his grandfather, is extremely displeased. He doesn't want Masachika to stand in Yuki's path to greatness. Masachika clenches his teeth in anger as he recalls how his grandfather told him he was no longer a suitable heir when he left home, and how it was his grandfather's brilliant idea to keep his relationship with Yuki a secret. Sighing at his paternal issues, Masachika asks Ayano if she's here to probe his true intentions on someone else's orders. Ayano explains that, since she is Yuki's retainer, it is her job to find out what the opposing party wants. Realizing that Ayano is as clueless as a doormat, Masachika assures her that he has no intention of going up against Yuki. He is simply trying to advance the plot with Alya. Despite this, Ayano, being as dense as a brick, misunderstands and asks if Masachika is deliberately hurting Yuki to protect Alya's dream because he's smitten with the Russian girl. Masachika curtly tells Ayano that he is helping Alya because that's what he wants to do, and instructs her to relay this information to her so-called grandfather. Ayano agrees, but before leaving, she asks Masachika how he truly feels about Yuki. Masachika responds that Yuki means the world to him, and that hasn't changed. Later, Masachika is hanging out with his friends when Takeshi and Neru excitedly show him a magazine featuring women and ask him to pick one for a freaky time. At first, Masachika tries to explain that he's not into that sort of thing, but not wanting to seem impotent in front of his friends, he picks a brown-haired girl. The boys then point out that the girl he chose looks remarkably like Maria. When they press Masachika about whether he'd think about Maria in a more intimate context, Masachika reminds them that Maria has a boyfriend. Suddenly, Masachika feels like someone is shooting daggers at him. Turning around, he finds Alya staring at him. Masachika quickly clarifies that the magazine belongs to Takeshi. As Alya takes her seat, the boys continue to probe Masachika about his type in women. Eventually, Masachika admits that he wants to date someone he can be friends with. Hearing this, Alya whispers in Russian that she would be the perfect fit, making Masachika blush. However, he then remembers a girl from his childhood, and reveals that he wants a girl with a bright smile. His friends, not understanding his preference, add that it's important for a girl to be approachable. Alya, who is as cold as a toilet seat in winter, becomes irritated by Masachika's preference and makes a big fuss. After berating Masachika for having such a type, Alya confiscates Takeshi's magazine. Meanwhile, Yuki asks Ayano if she is satisfied with her investigation. Ayano replies that her faith in Masachika has been restored and informs Yuki of everything Masachika said during their conversation. When Yuki asks Ayano how serious her brother was, Ayano reveals that Masachika was so serious that her uterus began to tremble. Yuki is taken aback and admits to Ayano that she was about to go off on Masachika but is relieved this is a child-friendly show. To further calm Yuki, Ayano shares that everyone believes Yuki will win the election, as many think Alya is being reckless by challenging her. Yuki is delighted by this and tells Ayano that she has been waiting for a showdown with Masachika, who is also intelligent like her, and now she finally has the chance to prove who is the better sibling. Yuki then turns to Ayano and asks if she looks scarier than a baddie without makeup. Later that day, the student council gathers for a meeting where Yuki, Maria, and Ayano play a bluffing game. Masachika, Kenzaki, and Chisaki watch from afar. The boys discuss how Alya, despite seeming cold, actually wears her heart on her sleeve, while Maria is harder to read. Chisaki adds that Maria even looks like she might have a few screws loose, prompting Masachika to side with her. Their conversation is interrupted when Ayano, observing diligently, is asked by Kenzaki if she learned to be disobedient due to her duties as Yuki's retainer. Ayano reveals that she learned everything from her grandparents, who used to work for Yuki's family. When Shisaki and Kenzaki inquire about her parents, Ayano explains that they are office workers, and she became a retainer because she admires her grandparents and has a humiliation kink. During the discussion, Ayano admits that she trained her whole childhood to become the best doormat anyone has seen. Suddenly, Maria joins them and reveals that Alya scolded her for being annoying. Concerned about Alya's well-being, Kenzaki and Shisaki are reassured by Misachika and Maria that Alya is actually enjoying the competition with Yuki, which is quite rare. Wanting to get some refreshments, Maria asks Misachika to accompany her to the convenience store. After collecting everyone's orders, the two head to the store. Maria thanks Misachika for supporting Alya's presidential quest, noting that with his support, Alya now has someone to rely on. Misachika shrugs off the praise, but Maria emphasizes that it's a big deal because Alya is very competitive. Misachika then asks Maria if she purposely hides her competitive side from Alya. Maria admits that her sister is very serious and tries her best at everything, so she doesn't want to add another battle to Alya's list of challenges. As they approach the vending machine, Maria explains that she is going the extra mile for Alya because sibling relationships are very complicated. This prompts Misachika to think about his own sister and wonder if Yuki is intentionally playing dumb around him. However, he quickly dismisses this thought, realizing Yuki is just not very bright. Maria then accuses Misachika of doing the same, but Misachika explains that he acts like a jerk because he wants to live an easier life. As a result, Maria pats his head and commends him for doing the bare minimum. The next day, Alya is approached by Tanema, who sternly questions her about whether she manipulated Misachika into partnering with her. Taken aback by the accusation, Alya remains silent until Misachika arrives and asks Tanema to apologize for her indecent words. Instead, Tanema calls for a general meeting, determined to expel Misachika from the student council committee. The following morning, Misachika and Alya set out to meet with the council president to discuss their unusual encounter with Tan. As they recount their experience, the president appears visibly confused. He expresses surprise, mentioning that Taniyama is known as a well-respected and exceptionally smart student, which leads him to believe that defeating her in these debates will not be an easy feat. Alya remains unfazed by this information, maintaining her composure. However, Misachika raises a valid point, noting that there is no tangible benefit for them in engaging with Tan, as she isn't even running for the presidency. Despite this, Alya insists that facing Taniyama still presents an important opportunity for her. She believes that by debating Tan, she can showcase her skills and ideology in front of the entire student body, which might help her gain additional support as the campaign progresses. Later in the day, Misachika and Alya meticulously review their debate strategy, fine-tuning their approach. Misachika puts Alya through a series of mock debates, listening intently to her responses as she counters potential accusations that Taniyama might throw at her. Misachika only stops once he is satisfied with Alya's preparation and confident in her ability to handle herself during the actual debate. As they prepare to leave, Alya suddenly asks Misachika a question that has been on her mind. Does Taniyama harbor any personal animosity toward him? Misachika pauses, gazing off into the distance as he reflects on their relationship. He eventually responds, saying that he believes both he and Taniyama respect each other equally and that there is no bad blood between them. In fact, Misachika reveals that Taniyama was once a close friend of his during their middle school years. This revelation catches Alya off guard, and she can't help but wonder why Taniyama would choose to oppose Misachika so aggressively now. Misachika explains that Taniyama likely perceives his actions as disruptive to the election process. From Tan's perspective, Misachika's decision to withdraw his support from Yuki, who is currently at the peak of her strength, in favor of a different candidate seems reckless. Taniyama probably believes that Misachika is simply stirring up trouble for the sake of creating chaos, which is something she finds frustrating and hard to accept. The following day, as Misachika and Alya make their way to the auditorium, they are approached by a girl named Mia, who belongs to Generation Z and is a known friend of Tan. Mia, appearing quite familiar with Misachika, greets them casually and suggests that they relax before walking ahead of them. Alya is immediately put off by Mia's confident demeanor, finding it difficult to warm up to her. Misachika, on the other hand, points out that Mia is incredibly popular among the students, which means that her opinions carry significant influence. This observation leads Alya to realize that a person with strong connections, like Mia, could potentially pose a threat to their campaign. Despite this, Misachika reassures Alya, telling her not to worry about Mia and instead focus on the debate, which is their immediate priority. As the students start to fill the auditorium, chatter spreads quickly throughout the room, with students from every class discussing the upcoming elections. The large crowd of students and the rising buzz of conversation begin to unnerve Alya. She starts to feel the weight of their judgments, believing that many of them might be questioning her worthiness for the position. These negative thoughts cause Alya to spiral into self-doubt, as she reflects on how she has never truly formed any meaningful connections with others at the school. Sensing her distress, Misachika steps in to calm her down. He reminds her that her true opponent in the debate isn't Tan, but rather the ideal version of herself that she aspires to become. He encourages her to relax, even suggesting that she Netflix and chill for a bit. Misachika assures her that if anything goes wrong, he will step in and handle it himself. His words manage to soothe Alya's nerves, and she gradually regains her composure as they prepare to take their positions for the debate. When the debate begins, Ken, the moderator, introduces both sides and invites the opposition to present their views. Taniyama is the first to take the podium, and instead of directly challenging Alya, she decides to target Misachika. Taniyama launches into a scathing critique of the student council, arguing that its members are handpicked solely by the president and vice president, which she believes opens the door to corruption, nepotism, and favoritism. She claims that some council members, who have never achieved anything noteworthy, receive special treatment despite their mediocre grades and lack of athletic ability. These individuals, according to Tan, are elevated to positions of power over other students who have worked tirelessly to succeed. Taniyama goes on to argue that the selection process for the student council should be based solely on academic performance and extracurricular achievements, with the decisions being made by teachers rather than students. Her speech resonates with the audience, earning her applause from the entire student body. As the applause dies down, Ken invites Alya to respond to Tan's arguments. Alya confidently steps up to the podium and begins to deliver her counterpoint. She starts by emphasizing that the school takes great pride in its tradition of student self-governance, which reflects the maturity and responsibility of the student body. Alya argues that if Taniyama believes the student council requires the intervention of teachers to make decisions as simple as choosing council members, then it suggests that Taniyama lacks the confidence and strength to manage these responsibilities on her own. Furthermore, Alya highlights that academic grades alone should not be the sole measure of a person's abilities. She points out that everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. A student who might be average in academics could possess remarkable social skills and problem-solving abilities, which are crucial qualities for a successful student council member. Misachika, observing from the sidelines, realizes that Alya has successfully defended her position. However, Taniyama isn't finished yet. She interrupts Alya with a barrage of questions, attempting to undermine her arguments. But one by one, Alya calmly and effectively addresses each of Tan's points, demonstrating her ability to stay composed under pressure. Misachika can't help but smile as he watches the scene unfold, noting that while Taniyama initially believed that he was her true rival in the debate, in reality, it was always Alya who posed the greater challenge. Taniyama begins to falter, struggling to maintain her momentum. She raises one final question, asking what would happen if the president or vice president were to lose control and go on a power trip. Before Alya can respond, several students in the audience start to cause a disturbance. They shout accusations at Alya, calling her an outsider and insisting that Taniyama is far more deserving of a place on the council. The unexpected outburst catches Alya off guard, shattering her concentration. She suddenly forgets the response she had prepared, and her confidence begins to crumble. Misachika quickly realizes that Mia is behind this disruption, having planted the students in the crowd to create chaos and throw Alya off balance. Unfortunately, Mia's plan works, and Alya is visibly shaken as Taniyama continues to press her for an answer. Just as Alya is on the verge of breaking down, she feels Misachika's reassuring hand on her back. Stepping in to save the day, Misachika takes the microphone and claims that Alya has lost her voice because she was busy deep-throating some hot dogs the previous night. His offbeat comment catches everyone off guard, and instead of continuing the debate in a traditional manner, Misachika switches gears and launches into an impromptu stand-up comedy routine. He begins roasting the student council president for no apparent reason, turning the serious atmosphere of the debate into something more lighthearted. Misachika humorously points out that if the decision of who gets to join the student council were left to the teachers, who would likely select only the top academic performers, Ken would have never become president. He goes on to describe how Ken had terrible grades and was considered a total loser during his first year, but thanks to the student council's focus on passion and talent, Ken was able to overcome his past shortcomings and become the beloved president he is today. With that, Misachika dramatically drops the microphone, and all eyes turn to Tan, waiting for her response. But instead of retaliating, Taniyama decides to avoid further humiliation and runs off the stage, with Alya quickly following behind her. Eventually, Alya catches up to Tan, only to find her in tears. It turns out that Taniyama had been secretly shipping Misachika with Yuki all along, and when Alya entered the picture, it felt like Misachika had abandoned Yuki without a second thought. This realization made Taniyama furious because she had always admired Yuki, especially after losing to her in the middle school presidential elections. To Tan, Misachika's choice to support Alya over Yuki felt like a betrayal, as it implied that Alya might actually be better than Yuki. Understanding Tan's frustration, Alya empathizes with her but suggests that she seek help from a psychologist to work through her feelings. Afterward, Alya returns to the auditorium, where she learns that the debate has officially concluded and that she has been declared the winner. Later, Alya shares with Misachika what Taniyama had revealed during their conversation. Misachika reflects on Tan's history and acknowledges that she was one of the fiercest competitors they had ever faced in middle school. However, Taniyama eventually accepted her defeat to Yuki and Misachika because she believed she could never surpass them. Alya listens to Misachika and, with determination in her voice, declares that she will work as hard as possible to become someone that Taniyama respects just as much as she respects Yuki. Alya hopes that by earning Tan's respect, she will also gain Tan's approval of her partnership with Misachika. Misachika smiles at Alya's determination but is caught off guard when she suddenly asks him a serious question. Why did he choose her over Yuki, especially when he and Yuki had such a strong partnership? The question brings a look of sadness to Misachika's face as memories flood back to him. He recalls the difficult circumstances that once forced him to be separated from his sister, Yuki. Wanting to make up for lost time, he had promised himself that he would always support her throughout her life, helping her achieve her goals. However, Misachika decides not to share these personal details with Alya. Instead, he tells her that he never truly wanted to be the vice president in the first place. In fact, he had always hated the spotlight, but he owed Yuki a favor, which is why he reluctantly accepted the role. Misachika goes on to explain that this time around, things are different. He genuinely wants to support and work alongside Alya because he believes in her potential to become an outstanding president. Hearing this makes Alya feel incredibly happy and reassured about her partnership with Misachika. Their conversation takes a reflective turn when Misachika, feeling curious, asks Alya why she chose to run in the presidential election with him, knowing how important it was. After all, she could have chosen someone more experienced or more well-connected to be her running mate. To his surprise, Alya responds to his question in Russian, a language Misachika doesn't understand. The mysterious reply leaves him momentarily speechless, and before he can ask for clarification, Alya gets up and starts walking away with a playful smile on her face. Misachika quickly follows after her, repeatedly asking what she had just said. But Alya, still smiling, teases him, saying that if he really wants to know the meaning of her words, he'll have to learn Russian. Alya, still smiling, teases him, saying that if he really wants to know the meaning of her words, he'll have to learn Russian. For me, it's clear that Alya chose him because she is in love and really wants his delicious white cream. That was this week's episode, guys. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel to see the continuation next week. Thanks for watching and see you next time.